Quick announcement before we get started. Our landlord has decided to not renew the lease, so we're selling a bunch of manga and magic cards over on eBay. Link down below to help support my family and get us into a new place. Prices are reasonable, unless you want to be generous, of course. A month ago, I did a video introducing this manga. I only talked about the first couple of chapters, helped set the scene, and asked you, gentle viewer, if I should do a deep dive of this series. The overwhelming response was yes. That brings us to today. Welcome once again to Musings by Danon. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Danon. I'm currently reading over 600 manga and light novels, and my two favorite genres are fantasy and romance. So on this channel, we talk a lot about both those genres, but we tend to look more into story structure and tropes rather than how cool the fight scenes are, or how great the animation or artwork is. Which brings me to the subject of today's video, a deep dive into Villager A wants to save the Villainess no matter what. Also, and I know it's annoying to keep hearing this, but statistically if I don't ask you to like and subscribe, the video gets fewer subscribers. Oh, one more quick announcement before we get started. I'm going to be streaming on this channel as well as Twitch. It'll mostly be Final Fantasy XIV, but you're more than welcome to pop in and talk about manga. Honestly, about half my streams are spent talking about manga, anime, or Commander. This is your one and only spoiler alert. At the time of writing, 28 chapters have been released. New chapters appear near the end of the month, so it's possible that Chapter 29 comes out soon after this video airs. If so, apologies, I won't be discussing it. We will be discussing the rest of it, so buckle up. For those who didn't watch the first video, this is an Isekai anime about a boy who wound up in an Otome game as an NPC. For those who did watch the first video, don't worry. I won't spend too much time getting everyone up to speed. Our main character, Villager A, realizes this is the game world his sister forced him to play. Yes, just like trapped in a dating sim. But unlike the world of Otome games is tough for mobs, our main character has a clear-cut goal. Okay, I could make a lot more comparisons between the two series, but I'll avoid spoilers for Trapped in a Dating Sim. Season 2 is being worked on, so I won't mention what happens in Book 3, or the rest of the series, which I've read and loved. Anyway, back to the story. Alan, our titular Villager A, wakes up one night at the tender age of 8 and realizes he's got a lot of work to do if he's going to save himself and his mother. If this world plays out the same as it does in the game, in about 7 years the Villainess will confront the prince, her fiancé, get humiliated in front of the whole school, challenge the woman who stole her fiancé from her, get wrecked in a duel, run away and try to hide in a monastery, but will wind up getting attacked and killed by bandits instead. Unfortunately for the prince, his ex-fiancée was the daughter of a duke. The death of his daughter enraged him. The suitability of the prince was called into question, with a good portion of the kingdom supporting the younger prince as the next king. Alan and his mother may die in the ensuing civil war, but the kingdom weakening itself to the point it invites invasion from one of their neighboring enemies absolutely will. So, in order to stop this chain of events from happening, Alan decides he must become strong enough to champion the Villainess. Let me explain. When a noble challenges another noble to a duel, sometimes they have a champion fight for them. This is especially common with women, at least in medieval Europe. So when Anastasia, our Villainess, challenges Amy to a duel, the prince stands in as the champion for Amy. Anastasia cannot bring herself to raise her hand against the future king, even if he deserves it. So she winds up losing the duel. Now, nobility in this world are usually possessed of blessings, gifts from the gods that make them more powerful than regular humans. Alan is a commoner. He has no blessings. All he has is game knowledge, which, to anyone doing their 10th playthrough of Skyrim knows, is far more powerful than blessings. Knowledge is power, after all, and Alan knows this world inside and out. So his goal is to turn the situation upside down. In order to do that, he needs to become strong enough to defeat the prince. Not kill him. Killing is easy. But he needs to defeat him without killing him, which, as anyone who has any training in martial arts will tell you, is much harder. Humiliation requires a lot more skill and power than simply killing someone. But getting to the top of the power hierarchy requires money, both for equipment and for the tuition to attend school. In order to make money, you gotta spend money, unless you start at the bottom, so you work hard to earn that dough. So Alan joins the Adventurers Guild and starts cleaning out ditches. It's not a lot of money, but it also requires no initial investment. I love this scene where the adventurers all seem rough and tumble types, but they're actually nice people. I mean, they are rough and tumble types. Adventuring isn't a job for the faint of heart, as Alan learns later on, but we'll get to that later. So, Alan spends a few months cleaning ditches and eventually makes his way down to the sewers. He remembers a hidden passage down there with a skill scroll, one that will become absolutely necessary. The scroll grants him the skill of concealment, ensuring he'll be able to sneak past enemies. It also allows him to sneak out of town and search for some ancient ruins, where the next scroll he needs is hidden. At this time, the ruins are full of goblins, but with a bit of luck, Alan is able to sneak through and get the scroll of appraisal. In Dungeons & Dragons, wizards hate wasting a spell slot on Investigate. But for some reason, when the players find a potential magic item, they immediately want to know what it is and what it does. Bless their munchkin hearts. If only they had a wizard who prepared Investigate. But what if it isn't a magic item? What if the players came across some strange figurine? Is it ivory or dragon bone? Knowing the difference could be the difference between selling it for 100 silver or 100 gold. Alan uses his newly acquired appraisal skill to find ways to make money using the local merchant stalls. In the bargain bin, he finds earrings worth 150 times what the merchant is selling it for. He's able to repeat this a few times, earning him enough money to continue on his quest. Skills and money, and eventually, the experience to use them properly in combat. Speaking of combat, after Alan sells the items he found back to the Adventurers Guild, he asks the guildmaster to train him in how to use a sword. One of the things I really enjoy in some isekai is how a character learns to use their skills. I'm pretty good at MMOs, I play a lot of different classes, and have experience with boss fights and high-level combat. But just because I was a very good prop paladin in World of Warcraft doesn't mean I'm going to be great at sword and board if I ever find myself in a fantasy world. No, I'm going to be great at sword and board because that was my preferred fighting style back when I used to LARP. Anyway, Alan begins training with the local guildmaster, a wounded veteran with tons of knowledge, but due to his prosthetic leg, he can't go on adventures anymore. He trains Alan harshly, running laps to build up his endurance, swinging the sword hundreds of times a day in order to build muscle memory. And after 3 years of cleaning out ditches and training himself, Alan has grown strong. His young body is fit. He's also saved up a sizable sum of money. But what's next for our young adventurer? Alan has finally saved up enough money to buy the Scroll of Alchemy. Alchemy in this world is sort of similar to what the Elric brothers did. You can take existing matter and transform it into something else. In some cases, you only change the shape of a thing, but you can meld components together to form something new. Unfortunately, the thing he wants to make will require another skill, the Blessing of the Wind God. But he has some steps to complete before he can do that. First of all, Alan tests out of junior high. He aces the tests. He did have to study for the geography and political portion of the exam, but the math portion was super easy. Most kids in Japan learn calculus in high school, so simple multiplication and division questions are a cinch. And once he turns 12, Alan is now a full-fledged adventurer. He's only an F rank, which allows him to go outside the city, hunt horned rabbits, and collect medicinal herbs. But after a day of that, combined with his 4 years of clearing ditches, he's earned enough points to rise up to E rank. This grants him the authority to travel from town to town. His first destination? The Valley of the Flying Dragons. In the game, Amy, the heroine, and Prince Carl travel there, defeat the Wyvern Lord, and gain the Book of the Wind. This grants Amy her second blessing. She already had the blessing of healing, allowing her to use healing magic. With wind magic, she's able to go on the offensive as well. But Alan is going to get that blessing before Amy shows up. But unlike in the game, Alan isn't here to kill any wyverns. The first thing he does is use alchemy to craft himself some shelter. A simple structure, of course, because he hasn't raised his level very high. Ditch cleaning doesn't give him much of a chance to practice his alchemy. But a simple one-night shelter that will keep the elements out doesn't need to be fancy. The next morning, he returns his shelter to its original form and enters the valley proper. Wyverns are very territorial, but Alan is able to travel through the valley unmolested due to his concealment skill. When Alan arrives at the Temple of the Wind, he is spotted. For the first time since he got his skill 4 years ago, someone can see right through him. Divinity tends to cheat like that. Alan finds himself face to face with the Wind God himself. And God needs a favor. In fact, if Alan helps him out with this little favor, he'll get the blessing of the Wind God. Jerome, the Wyvern Lord, is in love with the girl but doesn't know how to talk to her or get her attention. So Alan has to help this guy get the girl. Only the guy and girl in question are wyverns. Eventually things do work out in an adorable fashion, and Alan receives the Wind God's blessing. And now the cheat powers finally come into play. Well, not so much cheat powers. All of these abilities were in the game, and Amy, the heroine in the Otome game, picked them up as she went through her adventure. But Alan uses his cheat-level knowledge of the game, along with modern knowledge from 21st century Japan, to change the outcome of the story. They say that in the 20th century the world got smaller, and they're right. In the 19th century, one of the most famous books was Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days. Published in 1872, it tells the story of two men who attempt to circumnavigate the globe in 80 days. A mere 3 decades later, the Wright brothers discovered flight. And now, instead of taking months to cross the Great Plains of America in covered wagons, or a 3-day-long train ride, I can fly from LA to New York in 5.5 hours. The world record for circumnavigating the globe is just under 2 days. That's pole to pole and back again. And all of this is possible through flight. So of course, the first thing Alan builds after he receives the blessing of the Wind God is a glider. I love this scene. It has all the joy of a young boy given a new toy. Alan feels the joy of flight, the wind in his face, the freedom of soaring high. But he's also still a boy, despite having the memories of an adult. Alan's prefrontal lobe is not fully developed. He's not even a teenager after all. He was so focused on having fun and flying that he forgot to figure out how to land. Or to include a parachute. Fortunately, he makes a controlled crash landing in a lake, swims to shore, and starts planning his next glider. But Alan also takes some time to self-reflect. A lot of his actions have been very childish. Of course, this is because he's a child. Think about how wild and crazy you were at 12. Remember being a 6th grader? Or worse, an 8th grader? Talk about main character syndrome. So Alan goes back to the drawing board. This time, he's attempting to create a VTOL airplane that can fly with the use of the Wind God's blessing. Flaps, rudder, and an engine to control the speed. But controlling all of that is far beyond Alan with his current skill set. Time to get another cheat item, the Scroll of Multiple Chanting. Alan prepares another glider, not the fancy one he's designing, but a cheap one specifically designed for the upcoming mission. There's a legendary dungeon known as the Tower of the Sage. Over 300 floors, each floor packed with monsters and traps. It would take an experienced party months to clear this tower. Or Alan can just cheat and fly to the top. With a grappling hook and parachute prepared specifically for this mission, Alan leaps from his glider, sending it crashing through the wall of the top floor. He snatches the scroll, learns the skill, and then parachutes down to the ground before the dungeon can heal the damage dealt to it. Next up, the last piece he needs, the Chantless Scroll. This will allow him to cast magic without having to say anything. Combined with his other gifts, this will make Alan nigh unstoppable. But the elves have the scroll. And elves don't exactly get along with humans. We'll find out why later, but Alan is treated as an enemy invader when he lands on the outskirts of their village. He is swiftly captured and brought before the village leader, the Queen of the Elves. The elves interrogate him, wondering how he's able to make it into their forest, especially since no demon or human should be able to find it. The blessings of the spirits protect the elves. Alan explains that he flew, using his strange contraption powered by the blessing of the Wind God. After showing them proof, the Queen of the Elves apologizes to Alan. He understands, though. After all, humans and elves have had a rather contentious relationship for a while now. The Queen also begs Alan to help save their village. They've been haunted by a dark and evil spirit recently. Of course, the Queen's impetuous daughter doesn't want any help from humans. She'll take care of it herself. And just as she's getting going into a full-on tsundere-style meltdown, the evil spirit finally appears. Wait, that's not a spirit. That's an old man. But the elves only see a black fog, and that fog is chasing after the spirits. Alan decides to just have a conversation with the robed man. It turns out he's just a pervert. A lolicon, longing after an elf girl. Someone thousands of years old but still having the appearance of a little girl. Alan's able to talk a little bit of sense into the old man, who has come to the elves to ask for ingredients to complete a potion. Asking the elves to get the required items, elven honey and the leaves from the spirit tree, the pervert is able to complete a potion. The next morning, he is reborn as a spirit of light. Because, to understand the lolly, you must become the lolly. The newly reborn spirit pervert hands Alan the item he was searching for, a scroll with the chantless casting skill engraved in it. He also receives a pendant from the Queen of the Elves, a token of friendship. Any elf who sees the amulet will now know that Alan is an elf friend. And so, even though it wasn't exactly like it was in the game, Alan now has all the skills he needs to complete his mission. The next step in the journey is to gain levels. Alan begins by clearing out goblin nests. Using alchemy, Alan creates a gun. The bullets are fired using wind magic, and he's able to fire repeatedly due to chantless casting. Just like in a video game, a dungeon will continuously spawn monsters until the core is destroyed, changing the dungeon back to just a simple cave. Or, in Alan's case, you can just teleport back to the beginning of the dungeon by touching the core and farming more XP. This goes on for several chapters until one day, Alan is forced to commit murder. Taking the life of another human being is not easy. Monsters are monsters, and killing monsters is a simple pastime for all gamers. But modern-day humans have grown up in the most peaceful time in all of history. No matter what the 24-hour news networks say, we are safer today than we have ever been. Between 1939 to 1945, 1,000 humans were killed every hour of every day. Today, in America, for the last 20 years, we've been averaging 2.5 killings per hour. 2.5 compared to 1,000. I should say that Alan is forced to kill rather than commit murder. While on a routine escort mission, the caravan that Alan and some other adventurers are protecting comes under attack by bandits. Alan hesitates to kill anyone and is berated by the veteran adventurers. Alan has the power and skill to kill those bandits, and now, since they got away, they will rob and murder some other innocent, which means that the blood of those future victims will be on Alan's hand. That night, while staying at the village, the bandits come back and kidnap the children. Enraged, Alan chases them down and kills every last one of them, saving the girl he sat with in the carriage in the nick of time. The bandits' heads are placed on spikes and Alan is no longer a boy. Sometimes, killing is the right thing to do, especially if it saves the lives of innocents. From here, it isn't long until Alan finally starts school. He spies the villainess, Anastasia Kleiner von Ramslet. And remembering that this is an otome game with multiple love interests, Alan also spies the other boys that the hero was able to romance in the game, as well as the game's heroine, Amy. She seems to take an initial interest in Alan, but then ignores him completely. More on that later. Alan finds himself completely alone, observing those around him. He sees the tension between Anastasia and the prince, and also observes Amy as she sidles her way into the prince's life, as well as the lives of the other romance targets. This causes a schism to occur in the school. Many students support Anastasia, but even more support the prince. A lot of the girls on Anastasia's side bully Amy for trying to get close to the prince, but Anastasia intervenes. Even though she doesn't like Amy, bullying is not appropriate behavior for nobility, and Anastasia is a proper lady. Alan comes to realize that the prince is a selfish buffoon, not worthy to lead the nation. Someone who only cares about himself and doesn't care about the plight of the common people or his duties as the future ruler shouldn't be leading a nation. After a few months, the class rankings are posted. Alan is in first place, with Anastasia a close second. She approaches him, compliments him on his test scores as well as his work ethic, and asks for his assistance in a future endeavor. The summer essay assignment is a big deal, especially for the nobility. You're allowed to work together as a group. Anastasia asks Alan to help the prince's group with the research of dungeons. Since Alan is a sea rake adventurer, he is the perfect candidate to help them on the mission. And it goes about as well as you can expect. Alan answers all of Anastasia's questions as they tour through the old ruins, the former goblin nest that Alan found the appraisal scroll in. And here is where Alan's suspicions begin to manifest. When he'd played the game with Amy as the main character, she always seemed like a sweet girl. But this Amy seems to have a bit of a vicious side to her. She easily manipulated the love interest characters, but there was almost an edge to her, a hidden darkness. And when Alan led everyone through the cave, Amy immediately went towards the spot where the appraisal scroll was buried. During the entire trip, the prince and the other love interests were rude to Alan. They treated him like an idiot servant instead of their guide. However, Anastasia was nothing but courteous. She listened intently to what Alan had to say and was grateful for the experience. Alan remembered this scene from the game. Amy, Anastasia, and the 5 love interests had hired an adventurer to be their guide, and by the end of the event, Anastasia was openly hostile towards Amy. She was jealous of the attention that her fiancé was showing another woman, which is a fair and reasonable response. But this time, Anastasia was focused on Alan instead. It was like she didn't care about her fiancé openly flirting with another girl. This trend continues, with Alan either accidentally or openly interfering with events as they happened in the game. A well-timed sneeze stops Anastasia from slapping Amy. Though, to be fair, Amy deserved it. Alan and the Villainess grow closer as he helps her put together the report for the group. Of course, the prince gets all the credit for the report, but Alan found himself wanting to support Anastasia. Not just because doing so would prevent a civil war and the death of all of his friends and family, but because he both likes and respects Anastasia. Not romantically, of course. Alan won't allow himself to even think of her as a romantic partner. He's a commoner, and she's the daughter of a duke. But they do slowly develop a friendship as they spend more and more time together. Eventually, the day of the fated duel happens. The prince insults Anastasia in front of the whole school, calls off their engagement, and declares his love for Amy. But instead of being in a peak of rage like in the video game, Anastasia seems not to care. Amy has to manipulate the situation in order for a duel to happen. Eventually, it does, but not how she expected. Just like in the game, the prince and the other love interests all declare that they will stand in for Amy. But this time, there is someone who will champion the Villainess. Alan. Alan then provokes all 5 of the love interests. It'd be too much of a pain to have to fight all of you one at a time. How about all 5 at once? What? Are you scared? Marks, you have a reputation for being smart, but you keep losing to me, a commoner, in test scores. Oscar isn't popular with women because he's handsome, it's because of his family's money. Daruma is a meathead who can only get women to hang out with him if he threatens them. Enraged, the 5 accept Alan's ridiculous proposal. But Anastasia interjects. No killing. After all, it would be bad if the future king died in a stupid duel. Anastasia tries desperately to get Alan to quit, but he just calmly explains that he's in no danger. After all, he's the youngest C-rank adventurer ever. The duel begins, and Alan starts out with a smoke bomb. As the smoke clears, 3 of the 5 are already on the ground. The only 2 left standing are Marks and the prince. Obviously, the prince needs to become the future king, but Marks is eventually supposed to become the prime minister. But for now, Alan needs to teach them some humility. Alan points out to Marks that Amy was the one who accused Anastasia of bullying without any evidence, but Marks is still too amped up to listen. So Alan knocks him out with a palm strike. The last one standing is the prince, though standing may be too strong of a descriptor. He's the last one conscious. Alan verbally dismantles him. If being a prince is so hard and no one gets you, then just abdicate. Elope with Amy and run away. Moron, do you have any idea how hard my life was, you spoiled brat? Alan explains all of the prince's sins, points out how Amy has been manipulating him from the start, but it's too late. Amy already has the prince completely enchanted. In a fit of rage, the prince throws a massive fireball at Alan. Anastasia tries to step in to save him, but Alan uses his wind blessing to send the fireball skyward. The blowback also knocks the prince unconscious. Alan thanks Anastasia for everything, and then disappears from the school. Anastasia tries to track him down and finds that his room is already empty, and the maids are cleaning it. Alan had packed up prior to the duel, knowing there was no way he could safely stay at the school after a stunt like that. He'd just humiliated 5 very powerful people. He knew that they would never let him rest, and that his mother was probably in danger as well. Alan returns home and tells his mother everything. She understands, and tells him that he reminds her of his father. The next morning, a carriage is ready to take Alan to the Ramslet family. Anastasia's father wants to have a word with the boy. The last thing any noble wants is for his daughter to fall in love with a commoner. Unless that commoner is exceptional, of course. But having a commoner weasel his way into nobility using some dastardly scheme, that has to be stopped. So the Duke and Alan have a chat. Alan explains everything, except that he was reincarnated into an Otome game, of course. The whole reason he fought the duel was to protect his mother. The Duke is taken aback and asks Alan to explain. You see, if Anastasia fought, she wouldn't protect herself against the prince and would be defeated. This would cause her to be kicked out of the school. After all, the punishment for losing the duel was to stay away from the prince. If the daughter of a duke could be removed from the presence of loyalty so easily, logically, any member of a lesser household could also be thrown out of court. But what does that have to do with protecting your mother? Alan explains that he was worried about the kingdom itself and their neighbors. The Duke understands and is impressed by this boy's grasp of the political landscape. He promises to protect him and his mother. The Duke recalls the events of the previous night when Anastasia burst into her father's room and explained the whole incident with the duel. Her father teases her. "Oh, are you in love with this boy?" Of course, this causes Anastasia to blush furiously. It's in the early stages. The Duke goes to meet with the king to discuss the actions of the prince, and a few days later, Alan and his mother are invited to eat dinner at the Ramslet Manor. Because Alan didn't see Anastasia on his first trip, he's convinced that she hates him now. But that isn't the case. Okay, she is mad at him, but she's happy to see him now. Anastasia gets a little flustered. I wouldn't classify her as a tsundere, but she doesn't handle being teased very well. Also, she doesn't quite understand what these feelings are that she's having. So she may be acting a little soon during this scene, but I think the reaction's appropriate. The Duke explains that the prince will apologize when the new semester starts, and he asks Alan to continue to be a friend to his daughter. He emphasizes the word friend, and Alan understands. After all, she's a noble and he's just a commoner. Additionally, Alan will not be expelled from school or punished in any way. Also, you can work for me after you graduate if you want, but for now, enjoy your school life. As Alan and his mother are leaving, Anastasia pulls him aside to ask him to escort her and her friend when they dive into their first labyrinth. Of course, Alan has already cleared that labyrinth and then explains the concept of doing fast laps. As I explained earlier, it's where you kill all the monsters and then teleport to the beginning to do it all again. This is shocking to Anastasia, but she decides to go with him and see how effective this method is. They wind up gaining a few levels as Anastasia refuses to be left behind. She knows she has some catching up to do, but she's trying to become someone who can stand beside Alan. As the new school year starts, the prince and the other love interests apologize to the Ramslet family, and Anastasia makes a surprise announcement. Alan and his family are under the protection of the Ramslets. Anastasia also hands Alan her handkerchief, which he accepts. Her two friends stand up and cheer when this happens. Later on, the two are walking down the hallway at school, and Alan thanks Anastasia for announcing the protection. He also asks about the handkerchief, which causes her to blush. Anastasia's two friends come rushing up and explain. You see, when a lady hands a knight a handkerchief upon which she has sewn her family's crest, it's to publicly declare that he is mine. Okay, maybe Anna is a little soon. Alan thanks her and promises to protect her from here on out. Alan spends more and more time at the Ramslet Manor. Discussing politics, protecting the kingdom, and how to prevent the outbreak of war are all things he never thought he'd be doing, but the Duke likes hearing Alan's perspective on these matters. And once again, he asks Alan to keep an eye on his daughter, as a friend. For the summer research project, this year Anastasia wants to research adventurers. So she asks Alan to introduce her to the Adventurers Guild. Alan agrees, but makes her go incognito. Disguised as a commoner, the two of them head to the Adventurers Guild, and encounter Amy and her cronies bullying someone in an alleyway. Of course, it's someone Alan knows, Cheryl Laura, the princess of the elves. Anastasia and Cheryl instantly hate each other and start bickering like cats. We know that Anna has been acting a little soon lately, but Cheryl has been a tsundere the whole time we've known her. One of my favorite scenes in the series is right here. After Alan takes the two girls into a private room at the guild hall, two of the veterans who watched Alan grow up come and try to listen in. They think Alan is having girl problems. And to be fair, he is, but not how they think. But they get their just desserts. Anyway, Cheryl came to the city in order to ask Alan to come to the Elven Village to celebrate the summer festival. It only happens once every 10 years, so he's got to come. Besides, it would be easy for him to come on his flying machine. Alan, what flying machine? You've got some explaining to do, my knight. Anastasia asks Alan how he even knows an elf, much less an elven princess, and Cheryl takes the opportunity to tease her again. Alan is the benefactor of our village. He's the divine child of the wind god, after all. He descended from the sky and defeated an evil spirit. Did you not know? I thought you were getting along, but I guess not. Alan asks Cheryl to stop teasing again and agrees to go to the summer festival, but only if Anastasia can come. Cheryl supposes that's okay, but the only way it would be okay is if they were family. Maybe we could say you were his fiancé. Anastasia is not opposed to the idea and thinks it would be a great opportunity to learn about the elves. And so the three of them set off. Anna gets to see Alan's flying machine for the first time and is in awe of it. The three of them fly to the village, and Anastasia is once again in awe of Alan and how amazing he is. They make it to the village, and Alan gets a much warmer reception than last time. And the elves are curious about Anastasia. Alan introduces her to the Queen, and the Queen sends Alan, and everyone else, outside. The Queen understands that it was through Anastasia's influence that Alan and Cheryl were able to quietly leave the capital. With Cheryl being an elf, many humans would want to capture and enslave her for her beauty. But then she could have returned home. But Anastasia traveled with Alan to their village. Why is that? Why did you come with him? Anna doesn't want to say it out loud. She knows these feelings are forbidden. But at the same time, Alan is also starting to realize he has feelings for Anastasia. Feelings that a commoner should never have for a noblewoman, because that could never happen. And that brings us to the end of the current chapter. We are all caught up. I know I didn't explain everything that happened page by page, but I covered the big incidents. I think you can see why I love this series. As I said in our previous video, our main character doesn't have a hero complex. He's not out to save the world or anything. Honestly, he doesn't really care much about the kingdom. He cares about his mother. It just so happens that by saving his mother, he also happens to save the kingdom. Sure, the prince got egg on his face, but maybe he'll grow as a person. Probably not. At least not while Amy has her claws in him. I didn't really discuss Amy too much, did I? Let's talk about her. There's an entire chapter from her point of view leading up to Anastasia challenging her to a duel. Amy was also isekai'd into this Otome game when she died in high school, and she couldn't be happier. After all, none of the idiots at school understood her or even looked at her. But the handsome men in this game all understood her. They saw her for who she really was. And now that she's in this game, she'll use her in-depth knowledge of the characters and the story to achieve the hidden ending. She'll become the saint, save the kingdom, marry the prince as well as the other boys, and bring peace to the lands. Sure, some peasants may die in the process, but what does that matter? So long as she gets her happy ending, Amy is willing to do anything. I love the theme of a hero becoming a villain and the villain becoming the hero. After all, we are all heroes in our story and villains in someone else's. I'm hoping this series gets an official release. I'd love to read through the light novel and compare the two. Or maybe we'll get an anime. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, a huge shout out to Manager Cute Stuff. I couldn't make these videos without her. If you'd like to hire her to edit your own videos, she can be reached at cutestuff.edits@gmail.com. Link is down below. If you're looking for ways to support the channel directly, you can head on over to patreon.com/Danon. There are several tiers to choose from. You can pick an anime or manga for me to do a video about, or you can join our monthly manga club. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons: Waffles, Jiraiya, Danny, Muffins, Marcus, Brett, Roxy, Sean, Mark, Borgie, Nazwin, Midge, Alex, Alex, Conga, Aaron, Chris, Robert, Michael, Skinwalker, Sidewinder, Austin, William, Dan, Pye, Dead Seg, and Turner. You guys are awesome. I post anime or manga videos often, or you can click here to watch additional videos. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next time on Musings by Danon.